What if every rotten experience that you've been handed, most of which you didn't ask for, could be seen instead as an invitation for you to build something new, powerful, and transformative for yourself and those you love? Today, I want to talk about the idea of composting as a metaphor rather than just the literal process of composting something into soil. And I never thought about the word compost before until I started hearing Chani use it frequently on her podcast. The basics of composting in a literal sense are people, take their fruit or their peels that, begin to rot once the fruit's used, and they put them in a little bin and do some other things that I don't fully understand, and then that transforms into very, very fertile soil. So if we just look at the basics, it's this idea of something rotting being used as some of the most fertile, well-tended soil possible. I really never thought of it as a metaphor until I heard her use it in that way. And hearing Chani talk about this idea of composting something caused me to think about the ways that I've actually used the word rotten in my life, because there are relationship dynamics, people, situations I didn't ask for that feel rotten, where you know what I'm talking about. You can sense when something is toxic, when it's dying, when it's old, when it's outdated, and it just needs to be recycled into something else. A lot of times we don't ask for these things. We don't ask for some of the rotten, traumatic, stinking of death things that we're handed, but we're handed them anyway. And because we're so cut off from the natural world right now, we miss out on so many of the healing lessons. Think about this. Most of our fruit and food is wrapped in plastic. At least in the United States, the things that sustain us are housed in something artificial. And there's that old saying of you are what you eat. And that is true for so many reasons. It's not just the food itself, but also what the food is housed in. We eat things wrapped in plastic rather than things that were wrapped in soil growing in the sun. And so naturally, if you look at humanity, so much of who we are is encouraged to be artificial, just like the food that we eat, right? We're always learning from what we consume. We're just not always aware of it. And we consume a lot of rotten, artificial things. And so in the case of food being wrapped in plastic, we'll look at all the ways that human beings are encouraged to be artificial, to wear masks, to cut themselves off from the truth, to indulge in escapism rather than the healthy reality of vulnerability and growth. Because we live in such an artificial world where things are just wrapped up in shiny plastic that's easily tossed away and forgotten, we miss out on nature and what nature has to teach us. Imagine if all of us had a compost, or if all of us were growing our food. We would have real life, everyday lessons, everyday mirrors. We would see ourselves in nature again. We would have this connection to the food that we're growing, and we would notice, hey, this thing that is going to nourish my family and I for months was born out of something rotten. I, along with the earth's help, turned this rotten, used thing into soil, the best soil around. There are so many ways that we need to reconnect with nature again, that we have to see ourselves in nature again, because there's lessons that can transform us. I recently learned that Andrea Gibson, one of my all-time favorite poets, passed away a year ago, actually. I did not know that they passed away because it's something where I discovered them. I watched a few of their spoken word poetry videos, bought their books, and then just kind of sat with the work. I didn't necessarily follow them online. I don't spend a whole lot of time, scrolling or looking online because, I don't want to get too sucked in. But so I didn't learn that they passed away until a year later, which was heartbreaking for me. People got to quit dying, okay? Like, it just feels like a lot of people who inspire me just aren't around anymore, which I know the cycle of life and they are around, right? They're just beyond the veil. I know that, but you know what I mean. I miss them in their physical form and I feel this ache with their physical absence missing from the world. And when I learned that Andrea had passed, I felt a little bit of an ache that they passed from the world. But I watched one of their videos that they filmed when they were undergoing chemotherapy because they passed from ovarian cancer. And prior to that, when they were doing chemotherapy, they lost their hair and eyelashes, as many do when they undergo that kind of treatment. But in this video, they talked about how a shift in perspective helped them tremendously. Now, they honored their feelings of despair because they loved their hair, they loved their eyelashes, and they despaired when they lost them at first, understandably so. When there's a piece of your body that falls, that goes missing, you grieve that. So they honored the grief that they felt, but then once they honored that feeling, allowed themselves to feel that feeling, they were ready to shift it into another perspective. Okay, cancer is rotten. It literally rots your body from the inside out. It's a rotten thing to happen, and nobody deserves it. But what Andrea talked about with some of the effects that treatment for this rotten thing had on their body was, well, instead of just looking at this as a loss of my hair and my eyelashes, I thought about my eyelashes as wishes, right? That's kind of a common thing. People think of their eyelashes as wishes. And when one falls out, you wish, blow it away, right? So they said that when they thought of their 400 eyelashes falling out, as all these wishes that they then had to make, this abundance. And by the way, they shared the fact that the average human being has 400 eyelashes, which I didn't know. That's interesting. So they shifted their perspective to see this experience as 400 eyelashes being 400 wishes that they got to make, that they wouldn't have otherwise been able to make had they not experienced this loss. That is one example of how we compost something rotten into something life-giving, something made of growth. Now, I'm not suggesting a Pollyanna view of the world, right? Where every bad thing, we just have this toxic positivity of, oh, well, it's great. No, what Andrea did and what they're inviting us to do is to transform, to compost the rot into our own magic and our own power. So how do we do that? Well, number one, we let ourselves sit with the rot. And what I mean by that is do not engage in escapism. Don't deny how you feel. Allow yourself to feel that rot, whether it is some sort of loss or some sort of toxic family dynamic you didn't ask for, or some sort of just bad day, rotten day. Allow yourself to sit with those feelings. Allow yourself to feel them. Allow yourself to process them how you need to. Maybe it's through dance. Maybe it's through a journal. Maybe it's just through 5 minutes in the bathroom where you think instead of scrolling on your phone. Just give yourself the opportunity to feel those feelings. And then the second thing that you need to do if you really want to engage in this process of composting is to ask yourself, well, what can I do with this? Because so many of us are handed things we didn't ask for, even generationally. All of the trauma that's happened as a result of racism, sexism, homophobia, unequal, cruel power dynamics that harmed people of our past. These were things we didn't do, but things we were born into. We all are collectively connected, even if we don't see it. These were things we didn't create, but that we were handed. We were handed a mess that we then had to deal with. We were handed some of these rotten systemic things of oppression that we didn't grow, but we have to now deal with the rot. Life becomes so much more magical and powerful when we ask ourselves, okay, this thing has been handed to me. What can I do with it? Because you can make a choice. In Andrea's case, they decided to make a wish, to make 400 wishes, and to share that magic with the world. And I'd be willing to bet, because they were a very powerful person, that Several of those wishes came true. In my case, when I've been handed things that I wish I wouldn't have, whether it was, for example, a view of myself that I finally realized I didn't build this. I didn't teach myself to hate my body, to reject my psychic gifts, to muffle my voice. Those weren't things that I taught myself. Those were things I was conditioned to believe by the culture that I was born into, both collectively and familially. Those were things that I was conditioned. I didn't ask for that, but it was handed to me. So now that I'm aware of it, and I've certainly felt the grief of it, how can I now take these cultural things that I was conditioned to believe and compost them into something of growth that heals me, those I love, and the collective? Well, in my case, I wrote some books. I spent some time with my feelings, just like I'm encouraging you to do, and I wrote some books. And so, what is that for you? What can you make with what you've been handed? Because I promise you, you can make something. You can grow something. Because what happens with soil, right? It literally houses flowers, vegetables, herbs, the things that sprout from the earth and give us life, give us true sustenance. You have the power to compost your rot and make something sustaining from it. So what is it? Often it can be as simple as, okay, I don't want to do this because I've seen how it harms people. Maybe it's something in your workplace. Maybe you got handed a really narcissistic boss who treats people like disposable numbers. Okay. Well, now you've seen the harm that that can do. Maybe now that you've had experience with those dynamics, you can come over here and build a different kind of business. Or if you're not in a position to build a business that cares for people, well, maybe you can start to seek out one that does, because they are out there. Maybe you're like, I can't work in a place that is growing poison. There's no rot that I can take and grow here. Maybe I just need to exit this situation and find a place where they truly value their people. Art is a great way to compost the rotten things. And art and creativity are found in anything. I recommend, if you're looking for, if you don't have a lot of experience with art and you're thinking, how can I be creative? I'm not a painter. I'm not a sculptor. Great. You don't have to be. There's so many ways to be creative. And I highly encourage you to read Rick Rubin's book, The Creative Act, A Way of Being. That's an excellent way to start learning how you can embrace your creativity and make something. On a final couple notes about what we can do with this, I want to just talk about finding your tools, right? Because tools are a great way to build gardens, right? To tend to the soil, to tend to the seeds, the sprouts, everything. Tools look different for different people. And a lot of them are about connecting, right? Our tools connect us to our work. And so for me, my tools are listening to podcasts that contain wisdom and being open to learning new ones, right? For a while, I was closely following Jay Shetty. I did not mean to say shitty, sorry. Jay Shetty and Ed Milet. And they helped me a lot with building sort of this wisdom-seeking mindset. Jay Shetty also connected me to other wise figures, such as Rick Rubin. I never would have known about him if not for Jay Shetty. I never would have known about Chani if not for Jay Shetty. He connected me to her because she was on his show. So often when you start exploring podcasts that have wisdom, it connects you to other wise figures that support your growth. One thing always leads to another when you're seeking growth. The garden grows. And so find a podcast. You're already on this one. That's great. So share it. But find a podcast that contains wisdom. Find books that contain wisdom. Find groups that contain wisdom. get connected to your local community, see what's out there. Our tools connect us to our work. And so if you need help, seek out mentors, both those you can meet in person, but also those who can help you from anywhere. In my case with Andrea Gibson, now they're helping me from the beyond because their work stayed here, their wisdom stayed here as they passed on, and I can learn from them even though they're not directly in front of me. So find your tools. And maybe if you're someone who's kept a journal, or you're someone who has already made some art, maybe take some time to reflect on the past things that you've created. Tap into your own wisdom, things that you knew without fully understanding them. And to give you an example of that, I actually want to read a song from my book Sheltered. So often I hesitate to read things from Sheltered because it was my first novel and I'm insecure about a lot of the things in it because, you look back on the thing you made first and you go, oh my God, I can't believe I wrote that, or oh, that was too repetitive, or that, but I am learning to honor the different ways that I have grown, as an artist, and that without the original seeds of this book, I would not have gone on to continue to plant, in my garden. This was the book that started it all. And in this book, there's a musician named Alex who finally writes a song for himself at the end. So a little bit of a spoiler alert. You got to read his whole story to really understand it. But this is a song. And I mean, I'm still looking for someone to help me put an actual melody to it. So if you know anyone, let me know. But these are the lyrics for the song that he writes. So what does life mean when I choose to write the scene? Am I better alone where there's no roller coaster and I only coast? Uphill and downhill with you, but I am certain I am alive. My mind is my enemy and my best friend, my protector and a liar, desperately seeking truth. I live here, aware but sheltered, protected from the gifts of vulnerability. The only freedom is creativity. Uphill and downhill, open to life's cruel and swift turns, I choose to embrace what I see and make a beauty of my own. Nothing is ever certain, even when I believed I could create my own safety. I was never safe inside a world of familiarity and control. The same people, the same faces, the same stories. People lying, people scheming, but mostly people running. From the truth of the pain that others have shown them and the hurt they've caused for themselves, unaware that their pain is in every word they speak and dead roots give life to dry dreams. But even the cruelest of evils in life cannot prevent love from growing beside them. So I will be this anomaly, maybe a constant contradiction of what I should be. I will be everything, all that is honest and real in me that I can't explain, all that could allow me to hurt. Music is the voice I've needed to listen to all my life, and I will finally sing loudly enough that I can hear. I don't need to be afraid. I need not seek shelter. I did not deserve to be abandoned, and I won't abandon my chance. I'm not too old. I'm not too afraid. I'm not too weak. I'm not too damaged. I am my own creation, and I can embrace what I have been handed. I need not seek shelter. I need not seek shelter. I am the storm. So I wrote this like 4 years ago, okay? Long before I discovered Chani, long before I discovered Andrea Gibson. And their wisdom has lended greatly to my work, but I didn't even know it then. But my soul was speaking to me through this book. I can embrace what I have been handed. That's the whole concept of turning rot that you didn't ask for into an embrace, into something you hug and fill up with your own light. My spirit was speaking to me, and it probably set me on this path. This book is also about learning to embrace the ups and downs, the roller coaster of life, because the reality is living vulnerably, living honestly comes with pain, comes with uncertainty. But as I reminded myself with my own writing, uncertainty is inevitable anyway. We don't really know what's going to happen, so we might as well live honestly. So much of the rotten things in this life are born from dishonesty, from the artificial ways that we've been encouraged to live. So many of the corrupt things are born from lies. People living a lie, people being dishonest with themselves, believing that they can live a fractured, compartmentalized life. That's what Sheltered is all about. That's why it's called Sheltered. It's about people falling for the myth of escapism, to believe that we can shelter ourselves, live in this little box of familiarity because vulnerability is too scary, because facing that pain is too scary, because jumping outside of what we've known is too scary. It's not, and we can do it. Or maybe it is scary, but not too scary, not so scary that we can't face it. That's what Sheltered is about. It is about this concept of composting, of taking everything we've been handed, everything we've handed ourselves through our own self-destruction, and composting it into something life-giving for ourselves, those we love, and the collective. This is the healing that we need. Everybody needs to take part in this for us to truly build a society that's safe and kind and compassionate and connected. We have to begin with being honest with ourselves, with embracing the rot and seeing what we can make from it. That's how we're going to heal. And on a final note, I want to read one of my favorite quotes from Andrea Gibson from their book, You Better Be Lightning. And they said in here, if you are going to be anything in the world tonight, you better be lightning. You better find something in you honest enough to strike them. In my book, I had Alex call himself the storm. What if the thing that you've been lying to yourself or to others about could be the lightning that's powerful enough to transform you, those you love, and the world into something healing? We don't need to be afraid of storms. We need to recognize their transformative power. That is what it means to compost, to be handed something rotten, which we all have. That's the nature of the world that we live in. So it's kind of like composting is the only way for us to embrace it and grow something life-giving with it. And we do that by being honest about it, by spending some time with ourselves and reflecting on what our gifts and abilities are and what we can grow from the rotten things that we've been handed. That is how we compost. You know there's somebody who needs to hear this, and I encourage you now to share it with them. But in the meantime,